Good morning. I want to welcome you to the May 9th, 2021 message here at Meadowbrook Baptist Church. It's Mother's Day weekend. So happy Mother's Day out there to those that are watching. We're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 3, verse 20, the first mother. Do you know who the first mother is? So we're going to look at that. I think you probably do. A group of 4 geneticists back in the early or late 70s, early 80s, made an amazing discovery as they were researching mtDNA or matrilineal DNA. Alan Wilson, Mark Stone King, Rebecca Kahn, and Wesley Brown began making some amazing discoveries about the mother's DNA. That's what matrilineal DNA is. They initially chose the DNA of 21 different individuals and then expanded it to 145 individuals from around the world. Using the molecular clock method, they were able to calculate how fast DNA mutates or changes from one mother to that person's mother, to that mother's mother, and so forth. They traced the line of mothers from one mother back to another mother, back to another mother. And as they traced this DNA, they were amazed at how fast the DNA changes. Anyway, I'm not a scientist, but they believe they had discovered the MRCA, which means the matrilineal most recent common ancestor. And what that means, they traced back the DNA of all these people, 145 people from all around the world, back to one person, one singular person. And what they proceeded to find out was that sometime in the last 150,000 years in East Africa or the Middle East, they traced the DNA all the way back, the mother of an unbroken line, purely through mothers. They traced it back to one woman living sometime in the last 150,000 years, give or take. Of course, I wonder who this mother is. This one mother that all living humans, in fact, one definition I read for MRCA is the most recent woman from whom all living humans, that means all living humans, every single one of us, descend in an unbroken line purely through their mothers and through the mother of their mothers until all converge in one woman living sometime within the last 150,000 years. In other words, the scientific evidence through DNA, I've heard this before and read about it before, can be traced to one woman now living sometime within the last 150. Every single human being, one woman, comes from one mother. When these 4 researchers were in the process of publishing their findings, a story came out in the Newsweek, January 11th, 1988 magazine. The cover story, in fact, on the cover, it had a picture of Adam and Eve, and the title was Searching for Adam and Eve. Now, the researchers, particularly one of them, Alan Wilson, did not care for that title that much. He said, rather, I would call her the lucky mother. Come on. Now, they were saying, well, perhaps there was a break, and, even though all living people now can trace their ancestry to one mother, perhaps there were different lines out there that died out. No way. Folks, we know who this mother is, and her name was Eve, the mother of all living. What the Bible has said for thousands of years is true after all. Of course, I didn't need the scientists to back that up. They call scientists call her mitochondrial Eve, this DNA Eve that they've come up with, from whom literally all human beings descend. They've also got a Y chromosomal Adam that they've traced all living human beings back to one man, all human beings back to one woman, Adam and Eve. Of course, there's scientific, they have their debates. What the Bible said is true. And this morning, as we celebrate our mothers, we look at the first mother of all. This mother whom the Bible says Adam named his wife Eve. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 20, our text for this morning, it says, Adam named his wife Eve because she would become the mother of all the living. Well, happy Mother's Day once again. This week, as I thought about some famous mothers, I thought of some other famous first mothers, not Eve, the first mother, but the mother of presidents. I guess you would call them the first mother if their wives are the first ladies, and then their mothers maybe would be called the first mothers. The mothers of some of our most famous presidents. George Washington said of his mother, Mary Ball Washington, who, by the way, Mary Washington, George's mother, did not agree with some of his politics. But what she did impress and influence George on was in reading the Bible and praying. She had a place there on their farm called Meditation Rock where she prayed and read the Bible. But anyway, George Washington said of his mother, my mother was the most beautiful woman I ever saw. All I am, I owe to my mother. I attribute my success in life to the moral, intellectual, and physical education I received from her. Now, the second First Lady of the United States was Abigail Adams. Her husband was the second president, John Adams, was another famous first mother. Before she and her husband, John, went to the White House, she pretty much ran the family farm. Of course, John Adams was one of the key founders of America and all the 1776 and all this stuff. So the raising of their 5 children and the educating them, running the farm, all this rested pretty much on Abigail Adams. She was an amazing person. She also is known for advocating for women's rights and the abolition of slavery. But she was not only the first lady to the second president, John Adams, she was also the first mother, you might say, to John Quincy Adams, her son, who became the 6th president. And John Quincy Adams said of his amazing mother, my mother was an angel upon earth. She was a minister of blessing to all human beings within her sphere of action. Her heart was the abode of heavenly purity. She was the real personification of female virtue, of piety, of charity, of ever active and ever intermitting benevolence. Now, Abraham Lincoln, we'll mention his mother, Nancy, who died when he was 9. Actually, Sarah Bush Johnson Lincoln was his stepmother, whom his dad married after, but he called her mother too. But of his first mother, Nancy, he said, all I am or hope to be, I owe to my angel mother. Now, on Mother's Day, often we think, oh, how perfect our mothers are. These presidents sound like these famous first mothers, They were almost worshipped, you might say, my angel mother. How beautiful she was, and so forth. And often when we think of our mothers, we think you know we say good of them, and that's good. We should honor them. But in fact, as you know, mothers are not perfect, and neither was the first mother. The first mother. Eve, had a lot of firsts. She's the first woman. She was the first woman. She was created by God. Adam was put to sleep in Genesis chapter 2. You read about this. And part of that, God took part of Adam's body and made the first woman. And Adam, man, the Hebrew word is Ish. And when Adam saw his wife Eve for the first time, he called her Isha because she was taken from Adam. And it's a bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken from man. And there's a lot there. I mean, Genesis, I get excited every time I read those chapters in Genesis because it explains and helps us to understand who we are as humans and where we're going and why on earth we are here and why the universe is here. But it explains about Eve. She was the first woman, not just the first mother, she was the first woman. And I can say this at that time, she was the most beautiful woman in the world because she was the only woman in the world. She was, I could say, she was the perfect wife. She was the perfect woman for Adam because she was the only woman for Adam, but she was also, at this point, she had not sinned. And neither had Adam. He was the most handsome man, and he was the perfect husband. He was the only one. There was no others. But there's a lot of unique things to talk about. She's the first mother. She had no mother. Eve had no mother. Think about that. She had no example to follow as far as, well, how do I cook the roast, or how do I make this, or she was the ultimate trailblazer of motherhood. She was the first grandmother. She would be the first woman ever to give birth. Nobody else had that experience. She's the first one, which is going to be significant when we get to that point here in few minutes. But as we look at all of her first, being the first mother and her uniqueness, and as we will see that all human life came from her, after her and Adam, proceeds from her. We've seen the scientific proof for that. But she was not perfect. She was the first mother, but she was not perfect. In fact, she was a sinner. And to understand, the state of the family, we have to see that the first father and the first mother, the first wife and the first husband, the first marriage had problems because of sin. Given the choice, Eve, the first mother, after that point, the perfect woman, the perfect wife, up to that point, things were going great. But to understand family problems, to understand the downfall of this world, we have to see that Adam and Eve sinned. They were not perfect. They were not perfect husband or wife from that point on. They were not perfect parents. From that point on, when sin entered the world, everything changed in her life that day that she ate from the tree. And you and I might think, well, my mom was so this or so that, but we also know that our moms are not perfect. None of us are. There are no perfect families. There are no Ward and June Cleaver. We might appear, there's some people that really, we idolize perhaps. But none of us are perfect. And Eve, though she was the first mother, she was not the perfect mother. And she had her own problems that she passed on to her kids, and they passed on because sin entered the world through Adam and his wife, Eve. But the good news on Mother's Day, you might not see, you might see yourself as you might not be, uh, you know, uh, Nancy Lincoln or Abigail Adams. You might see yourself more as Ma Barker. I don't know, or maybe your mom was more like Ma Barker or Marge Simpson. I don't know. You pick your character. But here's the deal: no mother is perfect, not even the first mother, but they can be forgiven. In fact, before that day was out, before the day that Adam and Eve sinned, God had already approached them and had already went looking for them to restore them and to point them to the promise of redemption. There in Genesis 3:15, we see God telling the serpent, "Now you're going to crawl on your belly the rest of your from here on out." But then he went on to say in verse 15, as he told the serpent, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers." In other words, the battle is on between Satan, who wants to destroy families. And by the way, hey, wake up, folks. The reason all this gender redefinition stuff and gender neutral and gender this and that, and that's, all this, where that's coming from? That's coming straight from hell. That's coming straight from the serpent, because there's enmity, folks, between God's way and God's plan for the family and your family. Satan wants to destroy families and motherhood and fatherhood and manhood and womanhood. And hey, wake up, folks! Smell the coffee. Don't buy the liberal nonsense or the evil nonsense of this world. Because Satan, there's enmity between the offspring of Eve and the offspring of the serpent. And he's saying, every way possible, Satan's going to try to subvert the family structure and to subvert gender identity and manhood and womanhood and motherhood and fatherhood. But God, he says, I will put enmity between you and the woman and between your offspring and hers. And it's addressing something here because, we think of a man's offspring, but here at the very beginning, it points to a miraculous promise for this first mother between your offspring, talking to Satan, and hers. And it says, he will crush your head. Who's this he? It's talking about an offspring that was going to come, a male offspring that would be born of a woman that's going to crush Satan's head. You're going to strike at his heel, but he's going to crush your head. Who is this? This is Jesus. From the very beginning, the first mother had a promise that she could put her faith in, and an incredible gift that would be given. Today mothers, you'll be getting everything from flowers to candy, from jewelry to clothing to gift cards for a day at the spa, etc. But the greatest gift was given to the first mother on the day that she sinned and fell. God said, but wait, Satan, eat dust, buddy. And the offspring of this woman, he is going to crush your head. Deal with it. From the very beginning, God made a promise to the first mother, an amazing, miraculous promise, and so forth. But to the woman, he pronounced judgment as well. After she was not perfect, but he said to her, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe, there in verse 16. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Now, isn't that the truth? Back in 1951, a French obstetrician named Bernard Lamaze was visiting the Ukraine and was introduced to this psychologist or psychotherapist from Russia named Izzy Volvosky, who had developed a method to help women to ease the pain in childbirth through breathing and focusing, and also through massage techniques. Dr. Lamaze, of course, took what he learned there, and of course, many of you moms and dads took the classes the Lamaze classes, Patricia and I did. But let me tell you, in the three births that I witnessed, Patricia, we did the Lamaze stuff and focus and breathe and all this, but it was still painful. The first mother was the first to experience the pain of childbirth. Because of sin entering the world, the pain and the suffering of being a mother from the very beginning, it doesn't end just with the birth. There's sacrifice and suffering and heartache from mothers as they bring forth their sons and daughters. When does a mother stop being a mother, by the way? Have you ever thought that? I would say when she takes her final breath. But from the beginning, and particularly the birth process, painful, sacrifice. It's not easy being a mother. As you mothers know, and as I've witnessed, wow. The first mother experienced pain. But the first mother, motherhood, folks, is something that is amazing. It is amazing. And Adam, Eve's husband, as he's taking all this in, of course, Adam, he was not the perfect father, the perfect husband. He sinned, and God pronounced judgment on him. But as he thought about who Eve was and her role, and as he thought about her role in bringing forth children, in verse 20, he says, Adam named his wife Hava, or Eve, which means life living or life giver, because she would become the mother of all living. And I think it's important, in the Bible, names are important. They have the naming event happens after, it's a significant deal. Sometimes it happens after special encounters with God in which the person doing the naming or being named has had a spiritual change of some sort. And they understand who they are and their identity. And Adam here names his wife Eve. Now, we see this in other places, in other situations in the Bible. Abram would become Abraham. Sarai would become Sarah. Jacob would become Israel. Simon would be called Peter, because it is a realization. Saul would become Paul. It's a realization of God's purpose for a person's life, and here for Eve's life. And as Adam is taking this in, he's thinking about she's going to give birth to children. And of course, there was no children at that time. Adam and Eve, they were the only two humans. We know that. This is not metaphorical. Come on, folks, get real. You talk about science. Let's see where science leads. It leads to one man, and one woman, Adam, Eve. And as Adam understands the role of his wife, even though it has been greatly affected by sin, that she is going to be bringing forth life. He calls her Eve, Hava, or Haya. I think Ava might be, the English word Ava might come from Eve as well. That means life giver or living, because she would become the mother of all the living. She would be the one from here on out. She was the first, and Adam had a picture of God's purpose for mothers, and particularly his wife, Eve. She is the one that's going to be bringing forth the living. Back there in chapter 1 of Genesis, God created male, female, created them. He said, be fruitful and fill the earth, rule over the earth and subdue it. This is their mandate for mankind, was to fill the earth. to reproduce. And Adam here, they've went through a traumatic thing. Adam and Eve had sinned, and they realized all this stuff. But Adam, at this point, he's had a spiritual uh, change in his life, and he's realizing their sin, but he also realizes, hey, there's promise. There's promise that through Eve's offspring, there's going to be one that's going to crush Satan's head. It's going to reverse the curse. And that one is Jesus. And Adam here is acting in faith as he's naming his wife, Eve, the bringing forth of the living. That there's coming life. And that Eve has been given this one. Now, I was reading an encyclopedia article online which said this. According to the creation myth of the Abrahamic religions, talking about Eve, she was the first woman. But I want to tell you, this is not a myth, folks. You have to understand motherhood. You look at these geneticists, they stumbled on this 30, 40 years ago. Of course, they have their own, they try to change it up and try to reinterpret the facts. Oh, no, not, because, hey, wait a minute. All goes to one man, one woman. Come on. To understand, the book of Genesis and creation is so key to understanding gender, manhood, and womanhood, fatherhood, and here, motherhood. Now, the 116th Congress has, in their rules, they said, and this might just be in the legislation that is produced, that we are not going to call a mother, we're going to a mother or father, we will refer to them as parent or parent-in-law. Hey, this is not by chance, folks, and this is not political. This is gospel truth. This is theological stuff, because man and woman, mother and father, God defines the home, folks. And folks, if you haven't realized it, we need to get back to strengthening our marriages and our families, and the idea of what is the role of a father and what is the role of a mother. There's another school, Grace Church School of all things in New York City, issued in March. It's 12-page Grace Inclusive Language Guide. It requires don't refer to mom or dad, but instead refer to them as your grown-ups or your folks or family. Don't call them mother. No, call them mother, father. The mother, as Adam named his wife Eve, the one that brings forth the bringer of life, the giver of giving of life. The power of motherhood has never been described any better than, as Adam said, she's the one bringing forth the living. She's nurturing one. She is the one bringing forth life. Think about it. My mom's literally was my life giver. After conception, I grew, and I grew, and I grew. I grew within her in after conception, and was nourished by her life, the umbilical cord. And that at some point, she literally birthed me, and I was born. But did she just say, okay, that's it? No. She continued to feed me. Babies are breastfed. By whom? Their mother. That's the way we are made. The life giver. But moms not just feed us and clothe us and bathe us and nurture us. They take care of us, teaching us, continuing to nurture and to impart life. A mother in her essence, and Eve, this first mother in her essence, was this giving of life one, this life nurturing individual. And Adam named his wife Eve because he understood that's who she was, who God had created and made her and gifted her to be. Now, Adam, he was given an understanding of the powerful life-giving role of his wife. Remember Adam, the first father, the first husband, had no mother, and he had no human father. This was all new to him. And this is a spiritual aha moment as he is naming his wife Eve, the mother of the living, of all living, that here on out she's going to be producing life from her body. Life is going to be being brought forth, literally. It's going to be painful. But in the midst of sin, God brings forth life and the promise of life eternal that would be born through Eve's offspring eventually would be one that would crush Satan's head. Now, the first mother put her faith in God to help her bring forth life. There, Adam and Eve proceeded to do just that. In verse 4, chapter 4, verse 1, Adam made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. And she names him Cain. And we get in her naming Cain the understanding of her role and what was happening here, because the name Cain means brought forth. Now remember, Eve had never given birth to a child before. She had never watched, there's no Lamaze classes, there was no birthing classes. This was all new, and she had her own aha moment because she didn't figure this out. Well, we're going to have all these cells come together and they're going to form the baby's lungs and heart and the spinal cord and the eye, the lungs. And then after 9 months, she realized, hey, this isn't me. God brought forth this man. She said she became pregnant, gave birth to Cain. She said, with the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man. She put her faith. She realized that her role of bringing forth life came from God's helping her to this happen. It was impossible. And a mother, in the very essence of motherhood, realizes that she is partners with God, that God empowers and works powerfully within her in her role of being a mother. And she gives birth to Cain. What a blessing. What a blessing. Now, being a mother isn't easy. We talked about the pain of childbirth that has greatly increased because of sin. And Adam, he had his punishments as well, the result of sin. It's challenging. Being a father or mother is not easy. I'm glad that we recognize Mother's Day. I think it goes back to May the 10th. The first one was May the 10th, 1905 or 1908. I forget the lady's name, but Woodrow Wilson was the first one to make it official Mother's Day, the second Sunday in May. But I think it's important we recognize and we encourage mothers and pray for mothers and fathers. This first mother, Eve, had a lot of firsts, but she was the first to have tremendous heartache because of her kids. She was the first mother to have troubled children. She was the first, this was the first family, and the first family, I want to tell you, it had some dysfunction in it. We talk about dysfunctional families. Hey, don't think your family is the only family. You go back to Adam and Eve, and their oldest son, Cain, killed the second son, Abel. Murder. One son murdered the other son. I can't imagine the heartache and loss Eve experienced, and Adam, and Eve talking, why did this happen? And they're struggling with all this stuff. And Cain had an anger issue and a jealousy issue because of sin. When sin enters the world, we have family problems. We have personal problems. God is there to help bring forth life and healing. And it says Adam and Eve, came together again, and she gave birth to another son, and named him Seth there in verse 25, which means granted. And she said, God has granted me another child in the place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Now, Seth, I'm sure, didn't take away that emptiness. You folks have lost a child. It's not like they're replaced. But what a blessing Seth was to Adam and Eve. And Eve said, God has granted me another son. Oh, the heartache. This first mother, she experienced it all firsthand. All that she went through as first mother, and this giver of life. There was joy in bringing forth life and watching these boys grow, but there was heartache as well. And she continued to rely on God, as we all must do. And she did everything that she could. Folks, once again, of course, Eve recognized God had made it all possible. But we cannot thank God enough for our mothers today, these givers of life. I read the other day, salary.com. Every year I look for this. They come out with a new estimate that if a mother was paid for everything she does for her kids, how much would she get paid for being a mother? And they analyze all the things from dishwashing and so forth to laundering and counseling and doctoring and all these stuff. And they figured out this year, they said that if a mother was paid for everything she did, she would get paid $162,581. But I want to tell you, that's not enough, is it? Their value far exceeds that. We have found today, by looking at the first mother, the mother of all living, the essence of motherhood, the giver of life, one that brings forth life and nurtures life. Motherhood. Now, not all mothers are the same. They all have their own little giftedness and ways that they help bring about life. They're not perfect, but they have this powerful role. And I have seen other women that maybe some of them have never gave physical birth, but that were great mothers. And maybe they were not, I'm not even say adoptive or step, but they were nurturers, in that they helped develop life in people, and they cared for people. And you might be watching this, and you might never have been a biological birth mother, but I want to tell you, there are those around you as a woman that you can nurture life in. And that there is power, folks. I can't think of something that is as powerful as you're being someone who brings forth life and helps encourage life and growth in other people. That is a powerful role of a woman, and a man. But this giving, men don't give birth. Fathers have a role too in fatherhood, a role of instilling identity and purpose, and showing it is part of this life-giving role as well. But this nurturing, giving, feeding, loving, developing role is powerful. I think of my own mother, on December 27th, 2 days after Christmas, 1965, at 8:03 a.m. in the morning at St. John's Hospital there in Springfield, she brought forth a bouncing 9-pound, 8-ounce baby boy, me. Now, after I was born, she didn't stop bringing forth life in me. She continued to feed me and to nurture me and so forth. Remember, we recognize today mothers, the mother, the bringing forth of the living ones, and bringing forth of life, and partner, how they partner in faith with God, who is the author of life, and they work they work with God, as God has enabled them to not only physically birth life, but also to be the one that continues to nurture life And I've had, it's not an important person. I don't know what an important person. Mothers, folks, are important. We need mothers and we need dads. But I'm thankful for my mom. My mom continued to nurture me, to teach me, to wash and clothe and guide and direct and to demonstrate love. Folks, we need that. This is an important. Mothers are, from the first mother to your mother to mothers that are watching this right now. You guys are important. You have a God-given role. But you know what? As much as my mom brought forth physical life and social and emotional nurturing, the most important life-giving thing she did was on the night of Thursday, February the 15th, 1973 at 9 p.m. when she was tucking me into bed and I've been thinking about this. I asked her, I told her I wanted to be saved, I wanted to follow Christ. And my mom led me to life in Jesus. Now, I want to tell you, folks, the greatest thing, mothers need to embrace their life-giving role. They're bringing forth life. They're encouraging life in their children. They're bringing forth life. And the greatest role of a mother, a Christian mother, is to bring that person to life in Christ. And the greatest way, folks, that you can honor your mother today or this weekend on Mother's Day or in your life is that you embrace Jesus Christ, the author of life. He is the one that right after Adam and Eve sinned, that God told the woman's seed, there's going to be one's going to come and he is going to crush Satan's head. He's going to reverse the curse and bring life. You want to honor your mother, receive this promise of God in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Made to the first mother that realized, hey, I'm not perfect. The first mother that didn't have a clue about what is motherhood about. The first couple that, where Adam realized, hey, man, Eve, wife, you're powerfully important. You are the bringer. You are the mother of all the living. Mothers, embrace your role. I hope that you see how important you are. And mothers and fathers and boys and girls and sons and daughters, the greatest thing you can do is embrace the promise of life that was made to this first imperfect mother, Eve, through this promise of Jesus Christ. Mothers, wow, you're important. All of you listeners out there, you viewers, you're important because God has a purpose for your life as a father, a mother, a son or daughter, as a person. You have a powerful purpose. God bless you, and we'll talk to you later.